Good afternoon and welcome to the Committee on Lifelong Learning 2022 Awards presentation. My name is Pamela Harris Lawton, and last year I was the first recipient of the Pearl Greenberg Award for Teaching and Research in Lifelong Learning. The Pearl Greenberg Award for Teaching and Research in Lifelong Learning seeks to recognize at the national level an artist, educator, researcher who has made distinguished contributions to the field of art education in advancing art experiences for older adults, research on the benefits of art for the aging, and/or intergenerational arts learning programs in honor of Pearl Greenberg's legacy, promoting quality art education programming for learners of all ages, or as Pearl would say, from womb to tomb. This year, the award comes with a generous stipend provided by Pearl and Murray Greenberg's son, Ken Greenberg. Thank you, Ken. It is my honor to present this year's awardee, my colleague, Dr. Angela M. Laporte. Angela Laporte is a professor and director of art education at the University of Arkansas. Her research interests include diversity and inclusion across generational, social, and cultural boundaries. She focuses on understanding and reducing the implicit barriers that often segregate individuals and communities. She edited a book published by the National Art Education Association titled Community Connections, Intergenerational Links in Art Education, and contributed numerous scholarly papers to journals such as Studies in Art Education, the Journal of Cultural Research in Art Education, and our own, the International Journal of Lifelong Learning and Art Education, as well as Art Education Journal. As current president of the United States Society for Education Through Art, the organization recognized her for the 2021 National Ziegfeld Award, naming Angela a Kenneth Marantz Fellow, and awarded her their Outstanding Service Award. The Arkansas Art Educators Association recognized Laporte as the Art Educator of the Year and selected her twice as the Higher Art Education Educator of the Year. She currently serves as an associate editor for the International Journal of Lifelong Learning and Art Education, the Arkansas State Liaison for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, and is co-developing and researching an arts-led integration pilot program with local arts organizations and high school teachers. Over the past several years, Angela has been implementing and studying an approach to pre-service teacher education, inverse inclusion, a less hierarchical, more reciprocal learning method through inclusive and intergenerational service learning coursework. Angela is also a working member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences Commission on the Arts in Education, where she recently co-authored Art for Life's Sake, The Case for Arts Education, published by the Academy. I'd like to share with you a few quotes from her recommenders' letters. Dr. Laporte's engaging professional participation, care for others, and thoughtful academic investigations have made significant contributions to the field of art education. There are few educators in the field today with her wide vision for and active fulfillment of the academic mission of the university, while at the same time recognizing that people are at the heart of all that we do. Dr. Laporte has presented her research at a wide variety of academic conferences, locally, statewide, nationally, and internationally. This diverse environment for carrying out her scholarly endeavors demonstrates that Dr. Laporte desires to educate and inform those around her, no matter in what context she is actively working. The field of art education, locally, nationally, and internationally, is well served through the ongoing efforts of Dr. Angela Laporte. Congratulations, Angela. At this time, Angela will give a talk about her research.
Thank you, Pam. I'm going to share my screen. Is everyone able to see? Good. Okay. So I want to first acknowledge that the University of Arkansas, the location from which I am presenting today, is located on the homelands and territories of Indigenous peoples, including the Osage, Caddo, and Quapaw nations. Respecting Indigenous presence now in our communities is necessary to reckon and support Indigenous survivance. Before sharing my work, I would like to recognize and thank Ken Greenberg, the son of Dr. Pearl Greenberg, for his generous contribution to the Committee on Lifelong Learning to continue Pearl's vision for equitable access to meaningful art education, from womb to tomb, as Pearl would say. I also want to thank the awards committee and those who wrote letters of support. It is an honor to receive this award in remembrance of Pearl, who has been an inspiration for my work in lifelong learning for over 30 years. My first introduction to Dr. Greenberg's research began through conversations with my professor and mentor at Arizona State University, Dr. Mary Stockrocky, while pursuing my master's degree in art education. Soon after, I was privileged to meet Pearl in person at the NAEA convention in the early 1990s. Her work in the field inspired my master's thesis research, a microethnographic study of an art class for the institutionalized elderly in 1994. The site of an art class at a residential care facility for older adults that I co-taught with Dr. Bernard Young. One thing that I discovered at that point in time was the enthusiasm that the participants shared, always waiting at the door of the art room for our arrival. Outside of what I learned about approaches to teaching art to students with varying abilities, histories, and interests, it reaffirmed my passion for bringing meaningful art experiences to those who rarely had them. My dissertation at Penn State, an ethnographic study of an intergenerational community art program in New York City's Harlem in 1998, moved into a new direction. I worked with an intergenerational arts program in New York City's Lower East Harlem, funded by a number of different social service organizations in the city that involve seniors from within Harlem, in the neighborhood there, and teenagers from some location nearby or across the city. One component of the program involved the sharing and collecting of oral histories. I walked with teens across the area of Lower East Harlem to meet seniors at their apartments. And we socialized and gathered and shared stories. As a way to engage both generations, I asked the teenagers to come up with some questions to ask the seniors about different periods in their lives, and often prompted them through artworks from historical periods of which the seniors might be familiar. A couple of the artworks that I chose were Palmer Hayden's Midsummer Night in Harlem and Horace Pippin's Saturday Night Bath, to name a couple. There was also an art making experience at the local senior center, as well as social service components that were giving calls to the seniors while they were at home in the evenings, and also assisting with some grocery shopping. My participant observation study data in the form of conversations, observations, interviews, and journals collected over a period of 7 months revealed that the program not only provided exchanges of personal history and culture, but that intergenerational relationships developed, age-related stereotypes diminished, and participants felt empowered through the process. I then moved into my first teaching position in higher education at the University of Arkansas in 1998, where I continued my work while reestablishing the art education program here as a one-person faculty. In 2004, my intergenerational research led me to edit a book published by NAEA Community Connections, Intergenerational Links in Art Education. Last year's awardee, Pamela Harris Lawton, contributed a chapter to this book, and Dr. Greenberg wrote the book's preface. Soon after publishing the book, I presented on its content at the NAEA convention in Boston, where I was accompanied by my daughter, Maria, when she was about 3 months old. Murray Greenberg graciously documented the event that ended up being featured in the next NAEA news. I soon took on more active roles within the Committee on Lifelong Learning, serving as chair from 2005 to 2009, and editor-designer of the group's conference proceedings from 2007 to 2009. Besides presenting with Dr. Greenberg at 3 NAEA convention sessions, Aging Monologues in 2004 and 2006, and What is Lifelong Learning in 2008 to bring attention to the importance of art education for aging populations, I have remained an active member of the group over the years and now serve as associate editor of our journal. Over the past several years, I've expanded my research focus to disability studies and intergenerational experiences for my pre-service teachers who claim to lack knowledge and preparation to teach disabled students. I responded by developing a special topics course that I continue to teach, Inclusive Art Pedagogy, an intergenerational community-based art program for disabled adults. The class begins with my students learning alongside the community participants as I teach or co-teach lessons. Then my students develop art curriculum based on a big idea, rotate into teaching or teacher's assistant positions, while at the same time reading and reflecting on class experiences within each role. They also share the work of a contemporary disabled artist. At the end of the semester, my students and the community participate collaboratively in planning, curating, and hanging their exhibition. I named this approach to pedagogy inverse inclusion, where university students rotate roles as student, teacher, and teacher's assistant to experience multiple perspectives during a community-based service learning inclusion art class, to allow them to have more reciprocal relationships rather than hierarchical as teacher. I begin the class by introducing a lesson myself or with a co-facilitator. I once asked one of our lifelong learning members, Susan Whiteland, to join me in teaching fantastical stories through claymation. Another year, I collaborated with the Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art on a garden-themed unit with inspirational conversations and experiences at the museum. In the end, I tried to involve all participants, as I mentioned earlier, in planning the gallery exhibition. In the future, I would like to co-teach with one of the disabled adults from the community organization. So over the years teaching this course, I was amazed by one of the community participants, Hope, that inspired me to write a chapter for an upcoming book to be published by NAEA by editors who are members of our lifelong learning group, Melanie Davenport and Marjorie Manifold. This experience reaffirmed that teachers can stagnate growth based on their biases or promote growth expanding upon students' interests. The first time I met Hope, I was told to give her a box of crayons and paper and allowed her to sit in the corner to repeatedly draw and color her dogs over and over again. Instead, I asked students to engage with her and encourage Hope to expand upon the dog theme. She did when a student teacher asked small groups from the class to build a community model from recycled materials. Hope constructed a fenced-in area from popsicle sticks for her dogs and made them of cotton wrapped with pipe cleaners. Her illustrated book was the most impressive, with pages of visual sequencing of which she described as a story with other representations, such as ducks, a girl, mountains, houses, and trees. And when asked to share with the class, she would enthusiastically run to the front of the room. Whether it be a matter of disability, age, or race ethnicity, I believe that teachers' bias impacts art education experiences. The goal of my research is to study approaches to art education that can break down stereotypes and biases that people from diverse backgrounds, abilities, and/or ages have about each other through positive experiences in art education, coming together to appreciate unique differences and a shared humanity. I would like to conclude with a quote that Pearl wrote from the preface of my book. We can talk together, we can draw together, we can sing together, and we can think and exchange ideas together as equals. But we must approach each other as people, not as ages and stages. Yet, we cannot discount that the age cohorts we experience as we grow have very strong, long-lasting, and valid meanings in our lives. Thank you.
Congratulations, Angela. So well deserved.
Thank you.
So I'm going to introduce the recipient of our next award. This year, Lifelong Learning Committee was able to initiate a second award in honor of Pearl Greenberg's husband, Murray Greenberg, who was a huge supporter of her work in lifelong learning. The Committee on Lifelong Learning presents this inaugural award and stipend courtesy of Ken Greenberg to an emerging scholar whose research focuses on art education for learners across the lifespan with a specific emphasis on intergenerational and/or post-secondary learners. Dr. Liz Langdon is the first recipient of this award. Congratulations, Liz. Liz Langdon is a lifelong learner in art education. Her involvement in art spans careers as a secondary art teacher, museum educator, artist, and academic. In her research, she explores the rich community resource of local, older art practitioners and the value they offer to in-service and pre-service art educators in learning about place, history, art, and neurodiversity. The basis of her site-specific action research for her dissertation was intergenerational learning and curriculum development through older artists' mentorship, stories, and collaboration with K-12 in-service art teachers. Since graduating from University of North Texas in 2017, she's been on faculty in the Visual Art Education program at University of Kansas and held a courtesy appointment with the KU Gerontology program until that program is closed. She serves as the current president of the Lifelong Learning Caucus and serves the group in countless other ways as well. In 2020, she was the recipient of the Higher Education Art Educator Award for the state of Kansas. She publishes and presents her work in national and international forums, including INSEAC and NAEA conferences, and peer-reviewed journals such as Teaching Artists and the International Journal of Lifelong Learning and Art Education. In her work as teacher, researcher, and artist, she advocates for intergenerational community-based experiences with and for her students, exemplifying the commitment to lifelong learning and art education that this award is intended to honor. Here are a few quotes from her recommendation letters. Because she started her doctoral studies later in life, Liz has been able to personally experience life transitions as part of her research and enable student learning through intergenerational experiences. In reflecting on the significance of completing her PhD, she shared, quote, "I was 65, and this marks the beginning of another chapter in my art education, bringing my newfound understanding about issues of age and lifelong learning into teaching about art and education." In spring 2021, she worked with art education students who developed a family day activity at the University of Kansas Campus Art Museum. After the event, several students worked with seniors in a local retirement facility to complete the project. The students developed a workshop and reported on the multi-generational project at the fall conference of the Kansas Art Education Association in Wichita. Dr. Langdon values the rich community resource of local older art practitioners and the perspective they offer to in-service and pre-service art educators. Because of her appreciation and community awareness, she often facilitates experiences to bring the generations together to engage through art. Both in presentations and published articles, Dr. Langdon promotes the intersectionality of place and age as aspects of learning. Just want to say congratulations, Liz, and here's your award.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Yes. All right. That was so thorough that I can probably cut about half of my text. So if I stumble around and ad lib, it's because I'm trying to shorten it because y'all did such a great job. Thank you so much to my nominators, Dr. Liz Kowalczyk and to Dr. Susan Whiteland. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm guessing, let's see. I never know, you know, one never knows what's going to happen. Oh, here's a PowerPoint. That'll be good. So I wonder if I can just go to slideshow now. Slideshow? Slideshow, anybody? Slideshow.
Play from the start of your slideshow.
Yeah, look under view.
There we go. Don't know why well, oh, here we go. Okay. So thank you so much for selecting me for this award. And as the first recipient of the Murray Greenberg Emerging Scholars Award, I want to acknowledge my spouse, Earl Bates, who has been my partner for the last 20 years in this adventure. In doing so, I'm also acknowledging Murray Greenberg, the namesake of this award, who supported Pearl in her work, just like my Earl has. And this guarantees then my travel to New York to carry out my duties and continue my professional development. I've gotten to know a little more about Pearl Greenberg through my 2 years as chairperson of this group, particularly through the development of these 2 Greenberg Awards, and also in conversation with Pam and Angela and Ken Greenberg. As chair, I've looked into the history of our group, and the bylaws reflect many of the same goals that I have been able to pursue and enact through the privilege of teaching in higher education now. Following my other lives as an art educator and various configurations of mother, teacher of high school classes in museums and in volunteer settings such as Girl Scout leader. Let's see, so, first of all, I want to announce that KU's Visual Art Education Program is alive. After much consternation, it's been almost 2 years, and the provost has agreed to an art education program redesign rather than elimination. The faculty senate held hearings. Oh, these of course are my amazing students who recently protested, and as the provost walked by our protest, because this was just happened to be at a gallery dedication in the art building by our endowment fund, so there were several important people walking by, and the provost walked by, and we of course said, please save our program. And she said, we will. Later that week, it was verified in a letter from the provost's office. Prior, when the Faculty Senate held hearings, I and many other art educators came to voice our concerns, but also to exemplify the mission of art education. And as I heard the vote, prior to the vote of Faculty Senate, I heard members repeat what I had told them. The faculty at KU knew the value that our program offers to all ages of people in all walks of community life. So this is a little history. It was through the gift of a fellowship from the University of North Texas that I took this huge leap into a doctorate program later in life. Professor Emeritus Jack Davis lured me to North Texas through the amazing Pretty Leadership Program for art educators. And it was there I learned the importance of politics and advocacy in support of art education programs, which so recently was brought to life to my students and our whole department, actually. So in Texas, I helped prepare pre-service art educators through coursework and supervision, and I connected with older artists in Wichita Falls, Texas, as I was researching early Texas artists, defined as working 40 years prior to date. I found some amazing artists who were still working. And as I developed an early Texas place-based curriculum for the community of Wichita Falls, I decided to research the intersection of place and age in understanding specific artists and what art educators might learn from them. So that became the focus of a curriculum development program. I worked with in-service K-12 art educators in action research inquiries, learning about local older artists. And we wrote this curriculum, which highlighted Texas artists in the Wichita Falls Museum of Art, as well as identified, engaged with, and in some cases befriended local older artists. And the lady pictured third to the right is Jeanette Heiberger, who was 93 years old at the time of this research. And her painting hangs behind us. She had studied expressionist painting in Maryland and came back to her home state or home area of Texoma, Oklahoma, and Texas, and worked there for 20 years. And definitely with her stories of going out and returning to the culture of Texoma area, she taught me a lot and inspired me to search further for other artists. So the hardest and here, this is going to come. Yeah. So I used an action research methodology, cooperative action research. And it was very important to me because my participants were both K-12 art educators who were doing research, each with an individual artist, as well as involving the artists themselves as much as they could, using life story narrative to share their stories for the text, as well as developing lesson plans directly that they could integrate into their teaching. Hardest and maybe the best part of my research that has carried me forward is analysis and being able to, I'm going to go back here just a minute, being able to sit and think and write something that none of my previous roles ever really required in great depth. So I want to thank my dissertation advisors, Dr. Nadine Callan, for introducing me to curriculum of place and action research, to Dr. Jack Davis again for introducing me to the concept of intergenerational learning, and Dr. Detty Perez Miles for challenging me to understand and use a theoretical approach to focus my dissertation, which was completed in 2017. Maybe it was a mistake. I took on Deleuze, a European philosopher whose work was just recently translated in the 80s and 90s. But his, I started with Dewey, but it led me to Deleuze. So using both my action research theory and the study of Deleuze combined as a way to analyze the disjunctions in my data, which meant coming from a different culture. Texas is different from Nebraska. Understanding the way the educators thought and the artists thought, it helped me to rethink this intersection of place and age. And so I use the lens of Deleuzian theories of sense, event, and duration. So briefly, my understanding of Deleuze is that sense comes from words. Sense comes before words and maybe even before knowing, but there is a logic to it. And my research used Deleuze's logic of sense. He argues that it's important to pay attention first to the sense of an event, to pay attention when things do not make sense logically, and then use that, what he calls the disjunctive synthesis, bring them together to analyze events from different perspectives. So this has helped me take a critical look at events, which are more valuable by revisiting and reflecting upon them after the fact. And because the passing of time and aging does not have to be considered linearly, this relates to this concept of duration, which you see here. Duration or time doesn't have to be like in a linear timeline, but can share the common plane of place. So that flat plane you see between the two cones of past and future, that is place. And intergenerational learning can be coming together or inhabiting a plane of being at the same time, sharing experiences that can erase that barrier of age. Sorry, wrong way. So I thought a lot about trying to bring together then the Deleuzian ideas and the psychosocial theory, which is usually how intergenerational learning is thought about, talked about. So I looked at lifespan theory, mentoring, and the idea of social cohesion and social capital. So these are my artist research participants. I shouldn't say mine, but these were the artists that the art educators I worked with discovered from their community. And I grew to love all of them. And I've published now 3 articles, or 1 book chapter, 2 articles based on 3 of these people. And I hope I will be able to continue and publish more about them. Let's see. So these folks have been the foci of my continuing research into the intersectionality of ageism and feminism, mentoring and feminism, and intergenerational and place-based learning. Each has provided a focus for publications, as I mentioned earlier, including the NAEA News, as well as presentations and workshops. So I'm just going to summarize 3 publications, the findings. This one is called Older Artists and Acknowledging Ageism. Intergenerational learning has potential to reinforce ageist ideas through the culturally produced binary of old and young, which often describes intergenerational learning. In my research with older artists, I discovered that my age-based perspectives clouded how I perceived and valued older artists and their work. Because remember, when I started this research, I was like a young, late 50-year-old. So anyway, it revealed to me my implicit age biases associated with my embedded modernist traditions in art education, which minimize the value of art production viewed as feminine. Language associated with ageism shares the descriptors of the feminine, and that does seep into our perceptions. Cooperative action research with elementary educator Claire Walker and the artist Wanda Ewalt facilitated my personal growth, and through critical reflection, my implicit ageism revealed itself. In Artists as Mentors, a mid-career art educator rekindles her artist self. I think it shows that artist mentoring is professional development, particularly for female art educators, as an effective, an effective way to build knowledge and confidence. Excuse me. This intergenerational relationship promotes deep learning through mentorship. It's an invaluable form of professional development because it is affective learning. The IG, or intergenerational mentorship, between educator Carol Rose and artist Mary Stevens extended adult education by inspiring creative presentations of self-reflection and theory development. For female art educators, co-equal intergenerational mentorship is important because it builds an appreciation of the needs and assets of each participant. It encourages relationships which are important to psychosocial health and development. I advocate for art educators and late stage artists to work together in sharing stories and time together for valuable professional development in art education. And the third one, disjointed dialogue, intergenerational learning and place-based art education will be part of Melanie's book. I'm so sorry. Not every intergenerational relationship benefits all participants. A third analysis from this action research found a disjointed dialogue between the young art educator Audra and Ralph, who he self-proclaimed as being an older artist. Her fourth grade students benefit in classic ways that intergenerational learning can help young people expand their social networks and social identity. And they produced this amazing mural after the visit of the great artist Ralph Stearns to their school. He was a muralist, which is what is pictured on the right-hand side. So he was a well-known person, his images were well-known in the community. So bringing him into the school gave him rock star status, at least for the children. Yet the generational age difference between the artist and the teacher exposed gaps in understanding that related to age and gender. Because females dominate the role of the field of education, considering the gender of an older artist is an important consideration in developing a collaborative action research-based learning. The perceived social needs of the older male artist may not encourage a co-equal learning. So my research basically tells me, and I hope I've shared this well in my writing, that the complementary needs and assets is that age difference factor in intergenerational learning, and that success facilitates intergenerational and place-based learning. It puts relationship building in the fore. Cooperative action research ensures reciprocal learning for participants. It's a key component to intergenerational learning. And participants should look to discover at least 3 commonalities of experience within intergenerational learning. A shared relationship to local place or common culture is significant, and discovering a personal connection to someone else's life experience can create empathy, which can impact both participants and reverberate beyond the initial shared experience. In this way, each participant, younger and older, is given the opportunity to share in an uncommon experience of intergenerational learning. And really quickly, after landing my position at KU, I felt a lot closer to home and ready to make new connections to place to inspire my students to take advantage of the rich culture of Lawrence. It's a gem of a town, and the university sits on top of a hill. And when I look at it from out in the country where I live, it sometimes does remind me of Oz. My students and I developed a website where we could collect stories of local artists. It's called Teaching and Loving Art in Kansas.weebly.com. And researching local artists has the benefit of gaining a different perspective about local place and its history. And one of the delightful surprises, I discovered that the iconic grandma artist Elizabeth Layton was a recognized local artist. She had lived 20 miles away. I published this article in AA News in 2018, stating that art educators can challenge ageism by connecting with someone from a different generation, and like Layton, explore outside their comfort zone. Layton had stepped outside her zone to learn to draw at the age of 68. And both of these Layton images I love because they challenge the idea of the sweet old lady, that ageist stereotype. Through her daily self-portrait drawings, Layton used the wrinkles of her face, drawn with expressive blind contour lines, to tell her story and reveal her public and her inner life. So when my students were challenged to identify an artist that was healing to share with an older population in the service learning that was mentioned by my nominator, they chose Layton's work from the Spencer Museum collection, and they developed a community collaboration. So they taught about Elizabeth Layton both in local schools to 4th and 5th grade students, and they had them work on a postcard, which was a section of an Elizabeth Layton line drawing. The students were not able to get them finished, so when my students took the stories to the retirement community, the participants there helped finish. So they enjoyed being able to help the elementary students to complete the art. And our students had used the very localized imagery in this Cinderella drawing by Layton with our Kansas City Royals baseball team featured out the window of the castle where her husband, Glenn, is sitting on his throne as king. And and turned it into a cartoon line drawing. And so this was the collaborative puzzle art that was created. So that's what I want to leave you with, is that's my next concept that I want to write about. And so that's my future research. And I've taken far too long, but I sure appreciate everybody listening. And I really appreciate this award and everybody taking the time out today to come and celebrate with me and Angela. I couldn't be in better company. And I guess the last thing I want to say is the support of this community has been very helpful as we try and find a solid ground. My colleagues and I look for that solid ground of a future for art education. And it's worked. I think we're there. And you guys have really helped me. So thank you.
Okay, Liz, if you could stop sharing your screen for a second, I'm just going to close the ceremony. So I'd like to say thank you to everyone for attending this awards presentation, honoring educators and scholars in lifelong learning, Liz Langdon and Angela Laporte. We welcome those working in this area of art education to participate in our group quarterly member Zoom meetings and to join the work of the board and its officers, and think about serving on the review board for the International Journal of Lifelong Learning and Art Education. So please reach out. Thank you.